Today I'm here with my beautiful sister-in-law, Cami Humphries. She has 5 amazing kids and they have been through a lot. I asked her to come today to share the story of her 5th baby being born because it is so rare. I don't know that I've ever heard a story like this. She's been through a lot. The baby went through a lot. Take it away, Cami. Tell us everything that happened, start to finish. Because first, let me just say, they found out they were pregnant with their 5th. They didn't know if they wanted to have a 5th, right?
Well, my husband, Joseph, did, but
You weren't ready.
I wasn't quite ready. It took me like 3.5 years to get on board.
Okay. And then they finally get on board and get pregnant. And then tell me what happens.
Okay, so Joseph was in residency when he first wanted to get pregnant, and I was like, "Oh, you're funny because you're working the 120-hour weeks, and I'm home with the 4 kids." And he kept just having this feeling, and so when we got to fellowship, which we were in the University of Missouri, and
Away from family on
away
both
from
sides.
family. So we started and he was only working like 80 to 90-hour weeks.
Only.
And so then he's like, "Hey, what do you think?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is like so much better than the 120-hour weeks that we were working before. So let's try it once and it'll be good." Got on folic acid, did all the prenatals, did all that kind of stuff before we tried. We tried once and got pregnant. So then I did, because I was older, I was 38 at the time, did the genetic testing, did everything like the very beginning of my pregnancy. Everything looked beautiful.
Yeah.
We go in for a 20-week ultrasound, which was almost 21 weeks for us because of how Joseph's schedule worked. And within the first probably 10 minutes, and like, again, this is our 5th baby. It's not like we've never
Yeah, you've done this before. This isn't your first rodeo.
We figured something out. Like, I could tell something was up, and Joseph could tell something was up because the tech that was doing the ultrasound kept going over the bottom of his spinal cord, like over and over. And so Joseph finally was like, "What's up?" And she's like, "Well, it looks like Bennett could have spina bifida." And I was like, in my head at first, of course, like I kind of panicked for a second. I was like, "Oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
All
She's
your
not
kids
the
are normal,
doctor.
yeah.
We're good." Like, she's just, I chalked it up to her not being as educated as the doctor would be, right? Like, I'm like, "Oh," just trying to rationalize it out. And then, so she spent quite a bit of time like on his spine. And then she went up to his brain and she measured his ventricles probably about 10 minutes, which it's usually like 2 to 3 that
Right,
you're
yeah.
like doing the measurements on the head and then you move on. So again, Joseph's like, "What's up?" And she's like, "Well, your ventricles are so enlarged, his ventricles are so enlarged that I don't even see a third and fourth ventricle. So you have a right and left ventricle and then third and fourth."
Yeah.
And his were so big that they had blown out the third and fourth ventricle. Like, they just weren't even able to be read. And so she said, he's got quite a bit of hydrocephalus in his brain. I'm going to have to go get the doctor. So she did the rest of the measurements, and that's when like it really hit. Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't start crying."
What are you, what are you thinking and feeling
Oh,
right now?
panic, of course. Like, "Oh my gosh." And again, not like knowing the extent until the doctor came in, trying to rationalize it away. Like, "Oh, maybe it's not as bad as she thinks," or that kind of stuff. But like the panic started to set in, trying not to cry. Hearing that about your 5th baby, you're like, "What in the world is going on?" So then she left, the doctor came in, and the very first thing he did was grab my hand. And he said, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you have, your baby is so severe that his brain won't function like a normal brain." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "He has really severe hydrocephalus and he's got the spina bifida."
So you're basically being told at this point your son is a vegetable.
And Joseph flat out, like, I couldn't even talk. I was just in shock. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And Joseph said, "Well, what does that mean?" He's like, "He's just not going to have a quality life. He will be a vegetable when he is born." So then we sat there, absorbed the information. And again, I was just fighting back tears. And he said, "Here in the state of Missouri, you have 1.5 more weeks to abort if you want to get, like, if you guys choose to go that direction." And again, I couldn't talk. So Joseph's like, "Oh, what if that's not an option for us? So what are other options?" And he said, "Well, there's this surgery that you can do, but it's not really going to do anything for your baby because his brain is so severely damaged." And so then he brought up abortion 2 more times. So it was just like, okay, so clearly this doctor does not think that there's any reason to have this baby.
Did they tell you that the baby would still go full term and be born, but just a vegetable? So he could still grow inside you, but he would just have no quality of life. Okay.
Yeah, so it was just once he was born is when we we're going to have issues. He did go on to the fact that we could have a baby that has seizures, and because of the hydrocephalus on his brain, he started talking about the difficulty in learning. He's like, well, if he does function, he's going to have a really hard time learning. He's not going to recognize you guys. He's not going to be able to breathe on his own. He's going to have to be on a breathing tube and feeding machines just to keep him functioning on just a normal basis. So absorb that. I start bawling. I finally broke down, and he took us into a different room so we could just gather ourselves. And while we were there, Joseph kind of came out of shock, and he went into doctor mode. I just went into mom mode of like, oh my gosh, my baby is hurting, and he went into doctor mode. So then went in and asked a couple more questions. If we choose to do the surgery, what else do we need to do? He said, well, if you go that route, there's only a handful of hospitals across the whole nation that does it. And
you're finding this all out on the very first,
like the time that we're going in for ultrasound to find out like what the sex of their baby was, and like all the normal things that you would do at a 20-week ultrasound, we were finding this out.
So this is all just in a 20-minute time now.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was just crazy. So then as we were there, Joseph came up with a couple more questions, and he said, well, you'll need to come back for an amniocentesis if you do choose to do the surgery. That is a requirement. They have to have you do that. And we only had a short amount of time. And he's like, and there's a window that you have to fight to actually get into the surgery, because they only do the surgery in a certain amount of time. If you do it before, then it's too soon. If you do it after, then it's just
And it was 24 weeks, wasn't it?
So the window is actually 23 weeks and 25 weeks and 6 days. And
that you have to get the surgery done between that time. And you're 21 weeks at this point.
I was almost 21 weeks. I was 2 days shy of 21 weeks. So that shortened our window even more. So, and of course it was a Friday. So then we have to wait over the weekend before we can even get a hold of anyone. But we get home, and actually I didn't want to go home. I was like, take me to Costco. And where we lived, it was almost an hour and a half drive. And he's like, you want to go to Costco? I'm like, I do not want to go home. I can't face anyone right now. Like, I just need you to drive me. And he's like, okay. So he drove the hour and a half. We went to Costco, did some shopping. I cried the whole hour and a half there. Cried the whole hour and a half back. I've never been depressed in my life until that day. Like, it was the very first time. I'm super upbeat. Like, things just blow off me. And that was the very first time that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. And Joseph, as soon as we got home, he just got on the computer and he started researching. He found the 3 hospitals that had founded this surgery.
Yeah.
Found all the studies, read all the studies, showed me the studies. We got on a phone call with his family that night. His brother and dad, like, they all signed, like, the 3 different hospitals. One brother called one hospital, Joseph called one, and then his dad called the other on Monday. And then we got on a phone call with our family as well.
I remember that phone call. That, like, the second you started talking about it, I could feel my emotions just coming up. So I'm like, I remember that phone call and all of us just, everyone being beside themselves.
It was, really hard. And then we told our kids that night as well, because of course they knew that we were going in that morning for the ultrasound. They were super excited to find out what their baby brother or sister was going to be. With our 4th or 5th, we have a 6.5-year gap. So our kids were older, they understood. And then the stress of, like, not knowing what was going to happen with their baby sibling and their all the things. It just was really an emotional weekend.
Which is crazy, because, and I don't mean to cut you off, sorry, but at this point, I can't even imagine the emotions and how crazy everything is. That is nothing compared to what happens next. It just blows my mind that this was just the beginning of everything. Go on.
No, you're good. So it happened to be conference weekend for us.
For general conference for the LDS church.
Yep. And so that was the biggest blessing for me because again, I went into like this deep depression, and to be able to hear uplifting words of hope and love, and that things can be all right even during the hard, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
So then Monday hits, Joseph gets on the phone, dad gets on the phone, brother gets on the phone. They called the different hospitals. The one in California was out. They had I don't remember what it was, but they didn't have the dates that we needed to get into the surgery. And then we heard back from the Texas hospital, and we heard back from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And that's the one that Joseph had called. The Texas Children's Hospital, they did a different surgery than what we chose to do. So there's two types of surgery that you can do for your babies. And of course, I didn't know any of this and like what this was, but they can either do a whole open surgery where they open up your womb, they take out your baby's bum, they fix the spinal cord.
In utero. This
In
is
utero, I know.
mind-blowing.
Like when your baby's supposed to be inside you, they open you up. During the surgery, they have a midwife pumping your body full or your womb full of synthetic amniotic fluid.
Yeah.
So then your baby doesn't have to take a breath, all that kind of stuff. So it's still floating in the womb. They take out the bum and the legs and fix that, put the baby back in, and then they sew you back up. So that's one option. Or they can do it with where they go in with cameras. So they just make a couple ports, go in, fix the lesion, and then do it that way. So it's not completely open. It's just it's still doing the same surgery, but it's not open.
Different way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the miracles that happened within the first couple of days was because we had such a shorter window, we were able to get into Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which we shortened as CHOP.
Yeah.
So we made an appointment. We scheduled, we called them on Monday. By Wednesday, we had the approval to go. And by, I think it was that Friday or the next Monday, we were there doing the 3 days. Like literally they test you for 3 days to even see if you can even qualify for surgery because it's such an intense surgery. So within a week's time, we were in Philadelphia. We were doing all the visits that we needed to in order to qualify for surgery.
And keep in mind, there's 4 other kids at home.
Yeah.
And a husband who's finishing up medical school. Like this is, oh my gosh, I just remember. And you guys were in the middle of a move during this too, right?
We moved at the very end of it. So at this time, we had just moved probably, 3 or 4 months before. We're almost halfway done with no, it was 4 months before.
Okay.
My in-laws actually had, my father-in-law had lost his job 6 months prior. They were really struggling. So we had suggested that they could come and live with us in our basement, which was such a miracle because when I left, my mother-in-law for these appointments, my mother-in-law just took over because she was living in our basement. So she just came up and took care of the kids.
Yeah, that is a miracle.
The fact that the timing worked out the way it did, it just was really crazy. So we go to Philadelphia, we meet with the doctors. In the 3 days of testing, they test you, they test your baby to make sure your baby's strong enough to handle the surgery. And then they have you come back. If you do qualify for the surgery, then you have to come back 2 days prior to surgery to make sure you still qualify, and they redo some of these tests to make sure that nothing has changed in however long from the first initial test to the second test. So then you meet with all the docs and they tell you the pros and cons. One of the cons is that your child could die during surgery, which had happened up to 3 times before. They were able to get the heartbeat back during the surgery. And then they told us over the next week is when you have to have super crazy medication to keep you bedridden, no contractions. They don't want your body to move pretty much at all because it's such an intense surgery and hard on your body. And so then during that week's time, they had lost 2 other babies, but again, they were able to get the heartbeat back.
Oh my
I
goodness.
think the total deaths within the first 2 weeks of surgery was 3 by the time that we went in.
Which is still something to consider. That's huge.
Yeah, for sure. And then, but one of the other risks is that you have premature labor and you have your baby way early. So then they have you meet with a neonatologist to go over, okay, if you have surgery at this time, if your baby's born at 24 weeks, this is what the signs and like all the things that you'd have to deal with. And then if you can get to 28 weeks, that's a huge milestone. And this is what you'd have to deal with. If you can get to 30 weeks, that's even bigger. This is what you have to deal with. And they just go on.
Yeah.
If you can get past 32 weeks, they're like golden.
So walk me through the day of surgery.
Day of surgery. So we qualified for surgery, went home for a week and a half. And then I was there for the next 3 months. In Philadelphia, away from my kids.
Okay, so this is where my mind is always blown, because I'll never forget that time. Obviously, none of us will, but you had to be on your back, like couldn't move for, was it 11 weeks?
I was on strict bed rest for the first 3 weeks, where like I didn't want like very minimal movement. The first week I'm in the hospital. So we knew when we went back that we needed an adult with me 24/7 once surgery happened. So then that's when we reached out to the families to see
who can fly out,
who could come and help.
And this wasn't like you could go home and be on bed rest. You had to be there.
I had to be in Philadelphia the whole time.
So away from the other 4 kids.
Mm-hmm. From time of surgery on. And so then we reached out, we got a calendar, we got everyone lined up, went to surgery. Joseph was able to get a week off of work for surgery, that was a miracle in and of itself. Just because fellowship, you don't
get time off. Yeah, no.
You don't just like, okay, I'm not going to come in tomorrow. Like, so he had to get special permission from his program directors. We went to surgery. 2 days before, we found out that we did qualify still. And so then surgery was May 1st of 2019. And what's so crazy even about that day is as we were going up the elevators, my elevator got stuck.
Oh.
We happened to be
That's
early.
my worst nightmare.
Oh my gosh. We happened to be like 45 minutes early. They had to get the fire department. Like I was stuck between two floors, like panicking.
When you're already anxious about having this surgery. Oh.
But Joseph was like freaking out. I wasn't. I was like, it's fine. Like we're here in the hospital. Like what are they going to do? They can't do the surgery.
I would have been
me.
Joseph in that scenario.
And he's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Like they're going to cancel. I'm like, they're not going to cancel. Like I'm the patient. Like I'm here. It's not like I didn't show up. And so then the fire department was able to get the doors open. I could see them. I'm like, I'll just slip through. And they're like, you're not moving. So then they finally got me up. And it was like the beginning of surgery was kind of rushed because of that. And I walked in and I saw, instead of like being like asleep when you go into the OR, I was awake because we didn't have time to do the anesthesia before I went to the OR. So I walk in and like I see the whole 20 people, like literally it takes 20 people.
So intimidating.
And the doctor, the main head neurosurgeon, he's like, whoa, welcome to finally, like he said something about like making a joke like, hey, you're late. And they're like, didn't you hear she got stuck in the elevator? He's like, that was you? Yeah, that was me.
How do you start the biggest surgery of your entire life being stuck in an elevator? I've never even heard that part. Okay, sorry, go on.
Hilarious. So
not hilarious.
Surgery happens in the hospital for the next week. Don't want to go into like all the gory details of the stuff that I went through after surgery, but then we get released. Everything's fine with baby, and then we got released to hotel, and Joseph took care of me for the next week, and then we had a huge miracle that the Ronald McDonald House in Philadelphia opened up, which was amazing because they don't actually charge you for a room there. It's whatever you can donate. They feed you. They do all the things. They actually will transfer you back and forth from the house to the hospital, which was huge because I had to get ultrasounds twice a week.
Wow.
So everything, it was just, that was another miracle that we got in. And then for the next 2 weeks, they check you on a regular basis. And that's when I was like strict bed rest, couldn't move very much. And then after that 3rd week is when they allowed me to start moving just slightly more, walking a little bit.
Oh, you could walk a little bit. Okay.
I could sit up in my bed more instead of just having to lay down. But people don't realize like laying in bed, like how much pain you're in. Oh. Like, cause your body starts to atrophy. So my hips hurt, my back hurt, like everything hurt from just laying down. Ugh. And I was pregnant. So, you know, like my stomach's growing they are worried about baby kicking against your incision, and so then you have to make sure that the baby's trying to stay up,
And then on top of this, being away from your other four
and then I was away from
children,
my kids, and so we would talk every
which
single
is
night.
just
We
the
FaceTime.
emotional pain of that.
Oh, it was huge. It was really hard. Luckily, Joseph was there, and then my parents came, and then my mother-in-law came. So I had people, especially the very beginning, that I was the most probably comfortable with when I was going through the most transition with my own body and getting used to not being able to sit and move and then not being able to be with my kids.
Yeah.
Joseph, at the beginning of June, he actually surprised me and brought the kids out for a day and a half. And it was like the best day and a half ever. And then I didn't see him again until after Bennett was born.
And how many weeks did you deliver Bennett?
So I had a complication of surgery. Is one of the complications you can have is that your water breaks, which makes sense because they're opening everything up.
Sure.
So my water broke at 29 weeks. And once my water broke, then I had to be in the hospital. I could no longer be in the Ronald McDonald house because they have to monitor you way more.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to the hospital at 29 weeks, and then protocol is that they deliver at 34 weeks, no matter if you're in labor or not.
So you lasted 5 more weeks after your water broke? That's amazing. That's a miracle too.
Yeah. So, and I wasn't having contractions. Like I was leaking amniotic fluid every single day. I would feel it gush and just like, like when
you go into labor, right? Yeah.
That's what was happening. And then it would fill back up, and like my body was producing on a regular basis. And
Wow.
all those things. But then I was in the hospital on more strict bed rest than I was the previous 2 weeks.
So tell me about delivery day.
Delivery day, I actually talked my doctors, even though they wanted to deliver at 34 weeks, I talked them into an additional 5 days, which you don't think, like, at least for my other pregnancies, I didn't think like, oh yeah, I'm like 34 weeks and 4 days. Like, you don't think about that when
It matters.
you don't understand like how important it is to have your baby inside your womb for as long as possible. So I was able to talk them into another 5 days. And so I had this calendar. One of my sisters came and stayed with me, and she drew this huge mural on my window just to help keep me upbeat and, just positive. And so she did a rainbow. She did this like beautiful tree. And then she made me this calendar, like a countdown calendar, which was like a goal. Like, okay, one more day down, get past this next day. And like every single day was like such a huge miracle that I could like stay with Bennett inside my womb. Even born at 34 weeks, he was a 6-pound, 2-ounce baby.
It's huge.
He was huge. Like he would have been so ridiculously huge had we been able to get to. For surgery, your hope is to get to 37 weeks.
Yeah.
So even if I had carried to 37 weeks, he would have been a big baby. But full term, oh my goodness. I got to kiss him, and then he was snuffed with a neonatology team, and they had to hook him up with oxygen, which, being born that early, we knew that was going to be a risk. And I think that was it. They were initially thought they were going to do a feeding tube, but they didn't have to at first. Joseph was able to go with him after they finished my C-section. They put me in the recovery room, and then he was able to go and be with them for the first couple hours.
So how long did he have to stay in the hospital?
17 days.
Wow.
So he was there for 17 days. And even a couple days before we got released, they're like, oh no, like plan on at least another week.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he like took this like turn, and they're like, oh, he's doing great. You can go home. The whole time he was in the NICU, they weren't worried about anything spina bifida related. He was moving his toes. He was moving his feet. Like nothing that was supposed to happen, was happening for him. The biggest thing was his prematurity. And so he just was tired all the time. He just slept 24/7. He didn't want to wake up to eat. And so he did get a feeding tube eventually. And he had a little bit of jaundice the first couple weeks. And that was really about it.
So then, I mean, did he act like a normal baby like your other babies?
He completely was acting like a normal baby. Besides the fact that he was a preemie, everything else was normal.
You guys have got to see this kid. He is the cutest. Because he's 4 now.
He's now 4, yep.
And he is so cute. Tell me about him now.
Okay, so he's the happiest kid ever. He loves life. I think he realized, like, he just came knowing that he had a fight to get here.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like he literally, as soon as he walks in a room, like everyone gravitates to him. Everyone
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
loves him. He loves, like his biggest,
So cute.
biggest smile on his face. He's just like super happy go lucky.
Is he able to walk?
He walks now, which we never thought he would ever walk without an assistive device. We were told from day one that like plan on having him either being in a walker or crutches or something to help him walk, because where his lesion was, he wasn't supposed to move anything below his knees. And so the fact that even literally day one, he was moving his toes, and actually I saw him in an ultrasound, and Joseph didn't believe me. He's like, I'm like, no. Like during one of the ultrasounds, I saw his toes move. Like the doctor was like, did you see that movement? Like that's not supposed to happen. So
Such
that
a
was
miracle.
huge. And then, like he now can go up on tippy toes, which he's not supposed to be able to do. He can push up on his tippy toes. He's jumping, which he's not supposed to be able to do. And within the last month or two, he's started running, which again, he's not supposed to be able to do.
Wow.
So he's just a miracle.
He is the happiest little
The
kid
happiest
too. He's
kid.
just so
He
happy.
completely normal. He knows everyone, like knows everyone at church, like knows everyone's names. We haven't found any huge deficits in him yet. Like speech, he's a little bit lacking, but not enough to qualify for speech services. And
You know what? You said something to me the other day that I just thought was so beautiful. You said that you and Joseph were just sitting there watching him, and you were like, imagine if we didn't have him.
oh, we say that like on a regular basis. Like, can you imagine had we gone through with what the doctor suggested from
Yeah.
that first day?
Because they said he was going to be nothing but a vegetable.
Mm-hmm.
I wish everyone would know God is more powerful
For sure.
than anything on earth, you know?
Once we made that decision, I never questioned it. It was just like, nope, things are going to work out. Even when my water broke, like that was so hard to sit in a hospital room for 5 weeks straight, not being able to move. Like you can't move, you're in a hospital bed. You just have to sit there and mentally, like you'd think I'd be able to just like journal and do all these things. Like
No.
every day I was just trying to keep myself like positive. Like, oh, okay, I'm leaking. Like, okay, no big deal. I'm not feeling contractions. It's no big deal. My baby's still safe. Like it just was like this mental game that I had to keep myself positive and on just thinking positive thoughts and doing all the things. So like all the things that my sister Janelle did on the mural that I told you about, and then she put like positive thoughts along my walls, like scriptures. It was just, that's what kept me going.
Yeah.
That's what got me through it. So
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you want to say that you've learned, or that, I don't know, any sort of insight you've gained from this experience?
God is good, and he can overcome all. And so like the ceiling that I thought we'd have of like, even when you do the surgery, you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And I've just known, like, come to find out that like Bennett is surpassing everything that they told us was going to be. And I just know that there's no ceiling for him. Like, shoot for the moon, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
Thank you so much, Cami, for sharing that.
Yeah.
We love you and we love Bennett.